Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Jackman Radio. I'm flying solo tonight. Mike has band practice with his band, which is the best band in New Hampshire called Northern Stone. And real excited tonight to be joined by this guest. I've been a fan of her work for a while, and she just put out a banger video on Instagram exposing Meatball Ron and digging into who he is and what he's all about. So we'll be getting to that later. But I want to welcome Quinn Driggs to Jackman Radio. Quinn, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be good. I first heard about you when you did my show, my friend Reed Coverdale's show.
Oh yeah.
Probably that was last year.
Yeah, it was definitely in 2022. I think maybe in the fall or something, but that was really fun. I really liked doing Reed's show. It was a good one.
Yeah, Reed's awesome.
Yeah.
And I do a show with him. We haven't done it in a few months. The Four Horsemen, me, him, and Ryan Dawson. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've heard of this Four Horsemen, but I haven't watched anything. So now I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah, we got a pretty epic back catalog. But we've kind of just all been like busy, and Ryan has moved recently. So we kind of, we're on a little bit of a hiatus, but we'll be back at some point.
But you're all New Hampshire people, right?
Well, Reed's here in New Hampshire. I'm in New Hampshire, and Ryan is in Korea.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. He was in Japan, and then he moved. So, yeah, that's a whole I can imagine that's a whole to do getting your family moving because he's got young kids and he's married and he had to move everything over to Korea. So, and he's in South Korea. Just to be clear, he's not in North Korea with my friend Rocket Man.
Yeah.
Okay, he's not. He's in the right Korea. Although I like North Korea, they're very nice people, Quinn. They're very nice people. And before we were rolling, everyone watching, listening, I warned Quinn about my impressions and the political comedy and the shenanigans.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Yeah,
you're up there with my Shane Gillis, which I really
was. Oh man, what an
you're
honor
actually, to be. Yeah, you might be surpassing him. The more you do it, the more I'm impressed.
That's an honor to hear that right there. I hold Shane in very high regard. His Trump impression's great. But like my all-time favorite is Daryl Hammond. He's like the OG Donald Trump impersonator. He did him.
I don't know that one. I need to look.
Yeah, he did him in the 90s on SNL. He was on Saturday Night Live. And the reason I like Daryl Hammond's and I like Shane Gillis's too is they don't come from a place of hate. They're not just doing it because they hate Donald Trump. Like when you're impersonating someone and you go that deep into it, especially if you're going to dress up like them like I've done with Trump, on some level you have to like things about that character and their personality and their behavior their stuff. There's a real pathology to it.
Yeah, that makes sense actually.
We can dedicate a whole episode to that. but yeah, Quinn. So you were living in the Middle East and you're back in America now?
Yeah, we just moved to Florida.
Awesome, the free state of Florida.
Right, with my guy DeSantis. Ron DeSanctimonious is actually what I usually call him.
DeSanctimonious or Meatball, the Fuhrer Meatball. He's the mighty Meatball Fuhrer of Florida. He's not doing so well, Quinn. He's not doing so well. But yeah, you really put out just like a banger of a reel on Instagram about DeSantis and his record and his background. And a lot of people don't know this. Abby Martin and Mike Preisner of Empire Files put one out a few months ago, and a good amount of people watched it. Yeah. And it kind of went over a lot of the stuff you had talked about. But where did you first hear about DeSantis and his background, and what kind of response have you been getting about that?
Right. First of all, I love Empire Files and I love Abby Martin. She's awesome. So I have never even seen that, but I first heard about DeSantis and Guantanamo because I listened to Scott Horton's show all the time, and he had a writer that usually writes at Defense Priorities and the American Conservative. Her name's Bonnie Kristen on. And she was talking about it. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. And I mean, obviously up until this point, I have like plenty of thoughts about Ron DeSantis. I feel like to me, in what I've seen, it's just so politician-y, and I feel like we've, especially like people on the right, have really gotten away from that. Like what makes Trump kind of so likable is because he really just says it how it is. And I have plenty of things to say about why I don't like Trump, obviously. But I feel like he kind of he just created a new playbook in politics, I feel like, with what he did in 2016 and the way he ran his campaign. And I feel like Ron DeSantis is really trying to kind of toe that line between, I call it like a Bushism or a Bush era neoconservative, and like mix that with this like America Firstism that's rising. And he just seems fishy to me. Like, I just don't trust the guy, you know? And I just feel like his rhetoric is just, there's so much pandering going on. And I feel that he's just very insincere. And I don't know. I know that he's like, and I said in the video, like, yeah, he's rightly hailed for like what he did in COVID, you know, but we rarely ever talk about the governor of South Dakota and what, you know, they did in COVID. And so, yeah, he got it right. But like, even part of me, just being honest, feels like he just did that because he was, you know, politically like inept. Like, he knew what was going to come after, you know, and I felt like he maybe just saw things on the horizon, possibly, of where things
Right.
were turning, and like where to be so that he could have better political aspirations later. So, yeah, when it comes to the Guantanamo stuff, should we get into that now?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, let's just dive into that. So tell the people what you discovered about DeSantis and just why any human with a heart and a soul should be troubled and alarmed by this.
Exactly. So in the video, I talk about how he was a JAG lawyer in the Navy from 2006 to 2007, which is actually one of the most violent years at Guantanamo Bay. There was like a couple deaths that happened, and officially they said that the deaths were suicide. But when you really look into the investigation of that, it's pretty strange because like there's basically no way that these people could be committing suicide. And like the way that it lined up, like it all happened at the same time and in the same way. So pretty sketchy. And then alongside of that, there was like major issues with force feeding and stuff like that. And so he was there during a violent year, and he wasn't there for an entire year. I believe he was only there for like 6, 7, 8 months, someone along that line. But he actually talks about in his book, The Courage to Be Free, which I just think is a hilarious title.
The courage to torture.
He says that, you know, one of the things that motivated him to join the military in 2004 was the prospect of being able to be deployed to Guantanamo. And then he said in a CBS station interview that he volunteered to go to Gitmo, is what he called it, you know. That in and of itself is all I need to know. Like, what in the actual hell? That's creepy and weird.
You're going to be some kind of psychopath.
Yeah, like what? I don't even understand. And obviously 2004 was a time when everyone knew already what was happening there, you know? So think what you want about, you know, you can have all types of misconceptions about terrorism and Middle Easterners and Islamic extremists, you know, and we'll probably get into that at some point. But just the concept of torture alone should have been enough for you to steer clear of that. Especially because I just get so bothered when like people on the right, you know, they want to fight so much about wokeism and all these things, and they have Christian values, and it's like you are like the exact opposite of what a Christian is if you like want to volunteer to like prosecute so-called terrorists at a torture facility. You went to Harvard, you went to Yale, wherever you went. I know we went to one of those too. And you're supposed to be smart, and you're, you know, much older than me when you decided to do this, and that's where you're headed. It's just strange. Like that alone was enough for me. But then, you know, from there, he also, you know, just liked the idea, and he says this in a book, of being able to, you know, they were going to need military prosecutors and being able to prosecute terrorists. And then from there, I mean, I don't know. I'm like, should I break down Guantanamo Bay just for the audience? Because
yeah, absolutely.
On my Instagram.
Yeah,
as a lot of people my age like really just don't know anything.
Well, that's another reason I wanted to talk to you, because there's a generational gap here. Like,
yes.
9/11 happened when I was a freshman in high school. Iraq War drumbeat was immediately building up. I'm seeing people in my hometown signing up at record numbers. Right. My peers, guys only 2-3 years older than me, and my brother and I are looking around like, dude, even if you fully believe the 9/11 official story, Iraq has nothing to do with it. Iraq had nothing to do with the World Trade Center.
Exactly.
So this is insanity. But yeah, we're seeing like a guy like Ron DeSantis is kind of charting his course and seeing his path. Mm-hmm. And if that means having to go down there and be involved in torture and the most insidious abuse of other human beings known to man, next to killing them, it's kind of all you need to know about them. So yeah, if you want to break some of that down for us, please do, Quinn.
Yeah, because I was 2 years old when 9/11 happened. And I just know that, I feel like everyone has heard of Guantanamo Bay and associates it somewhat with torture, but I don't think they always realize that the people that were there were actually innocent people being tortured. And it doesn't matter whether you're innocent or not. But, I think a lot of people can really rationalize in their heads, like, they should be tortured, or torture leads to correct results, or whatever it is.
Struck me about your reel. What was that number? Over 80% of the people there were innocent?
Well, arguably, every single person there is innocent.
Because there were 8 convictions and 4 of them got overturned?
There was 800 people about 780 approximately that ever went into Guantanamo Bay. And only 8 people have ever been convicted. 4 of those convictions have actually since been overturned. And the convictions in the first place aren't done in a fair manner, which is half the issue. And a lot of them are done just through plea deals. And so it's really just a matter of, like, they got a confession from their torture sessions, which should be thrown out of court immediately, right? And that's why a lot of them were overturned. They just can't be held up. But then unfortunately, they just get caught in this like limbo system. And I guess we'll talk about that. But yeah, so I would arguably say that like every single person in Guantanamo is essentially innocent, maybe except for like Abu Zubaydah, which we have like pretty clear evidence on that. But everyone else was essentially random Afghans and Arabs that were just rounded up. So basically what I talk about is, well, first of all, like we know that the opening of Guantanamo Bay it's against the Bill of Rights, which represents people, not just Americans. It's against the U.S. Constitution under a couple different amendments. It's against the Geneva Conventions in Article 5, and then it's against the UN Convention Against Torture, which, the U.S. is a signatory to. And 86% of the detainees weren't even captured by U.S. forces. They were sold to the U.S. for bounties. So they basically incentivized different Afghan and Pakistani allies to go out and just round up whoever they deemed was suspicious. And it could be really anyone crossing the Afghan-Pakistan border. And so that's what they did, and a lot of these people, like, some of them were boys, right? So there was about 15 teenagers involved in this, which just like makes me really sick in my stomach. And there was people that made literally millions of dollars for selling these people to the US, and they get $5,000 per head, which is life-changing money, obviously, for them. So just the twisted incentives that are involved are that's enough. Like, that's it. That's all you need to know at that point, except that there's more. So yeah. And then once they turned them over to US custody, they didn't screen them. They didn't do anything that would determine whether they should even be there or not. And they admit this, and we can link maybe a couple articles that go way, way deeper into this than I did on my video. But it's just really sad. And there's one man, I know that I'm like going to forget his name, but I know he's from Yemen. I want to say it's Abu Adaifa, and he is Yemeni. And he was sent to Afghanistan to do research on Al-Qaeda. And he's like a scientist. And he was one of the people, he's an affluent man. He has like a full career. He was one of the people that was taken into U.S. custody and sent into Guantanamo and was there for years and years and years. And he was tortured. And he came forward in one of these articles. I didn't even get into this in the video because there just wasn't enough time or space because I wanted to try to keep it short. And obviously it's alleged, right? But he's like, I remember DeSantis's face, like, once I saw him running for governor, like, of course, his face came back to me and things like that. And we'll get into why. It's because DeSantis, was intimately involved with the detainees because of his job description. So they weren't even screened in the first place. And like, that's just one story out of hundreds of just this man who's done nothing wrong. And they even like picked up people that were part of the Northern Alliance, who's supposed to be our allies. Like it's
Right.
nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Or they, whoever was suspicious was anyone that was essentially Arab, that was in Afghanistan, because they're Arab, then that supposedly means that they're part of Al Qaeda. So it's
Right.
just gross. And then obviously, like, I got into the different types of torture they were subjected to, which is sexual assault, exposure to extreme temperatures, waterboarding, sound and light manipulation, exploitation of personal fears, beatings, sleep deprivation, starvation, forced feeding, solitary confinement, and forced stress positions. And I said in the video, like, I really encourage people to go read some stories, because when you like really get into the nitty gritty details of what was happening, I don't understand how you can't read it. And like, me and my mom were just saying, like, my parents are like, well, my stepdad is like, loves Fox News. And, he's all on the DeSantis train. And so I'm always trying to explain to like people in my life, like,
Yeah.
and I feel like this has got to be enough for you. But like, we were just saying, talking about this video, she was just like, even if someone like did something to me, like, I don't think I could fathom them being tortured, and I'm definitely someone that, like, obviously I don't know what would have to happen for me to like want someone to be tortured, but I'm not sure that there's anything, because when you really get into the nitty gritty of what torture looks like it's not, there's so much darkness there. And I don't know how like a God-fearing person could even get into that, or just a good person. Forget about
Yeah.
God. You know what I mean?
It's ugly. Yeah.
Ugly.
It's one of the darkest, ugliest aspects of the American empire, and it's just been so swept under the rug and
So swept
so
under the rug.
watered down. And did you see the Mauritanian?
My mom keeps telling me to watch this movie, but I haven't like gone up the courage, because I'm like,
Yeah,
the energy. I'm like, I gotta protect my energy.
I know, I know.
Because
It's
I
tough.
internalize this stuff.
Yeah,
When I was doing the research for the video, I like was crying. I don't know.
yeah.
That to me.
Well, you're a human being who cares.
Yeah,
Of course. Yeah. No,
yeah.
this stuff gets to
It's
you.
emotional and it's serious,
It
and
is. It is.
it
It's
needs to be taken seriously. So,
yeah, and we need to keep talking about it and keep
mhm,
giving a voice to these poor souls. Yeah,
exactly.
the Mauritanian is about. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, but Mohamedou Ould Salih,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and he was detained at Gitmo from 2002 until he was released in 2016. And um,
It's
it,
such
the
a life.
story is just unbelievable. It's
Yeah, I
definitely
really need to watch it.
worth
I
checking
would watch
out.
it, I think.
Yeah, and there's just so many stories like that's just one we know about. And then of
Exactly.
course the
There's
one
hundreds,
yeah.
literally hundreds of stories.
So Mike Preisner goes into that in his Empire Files special. I think actually he interviews a guy who was there who recognized Meatball, who like was able to identify who
Okay,
it
so it's
was.
probably the same guy that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, because he's like been over all these different articles. I just didn't get into it. And there's a social media account I follow called AJ Plus. They put out some pretty good work. I know that they're funded by the UAE, but they do
Is
good
that Al
sometimes.
Jazeera?
Yeah, I guess it's Al Jazeera Plus, but
Al Jazeera does good work sometimes. It's
they
kind
do.
of like
Like, you
any
just have
big.
to be able to have your own filters on.
That's exactly. You have to have your own discernment,
Yeah.
and you have to understand that sometimes they're going to get something right. It's going to be really good, and then other times this is just propaganda.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's with
Most
everything.
people
Yeah,
are
yeah,
pretty aware of that too. People are pretty good at discerning things for themselves, I've noticed.
yeah. I try to look at as many sources in mainstream and indie and
Yes.
semi-mainstream, and then
Same.
even governmental.
Yes.
If you do a smattering of all of that and look at as much as you can, it's going to really help inform your understanding of
I put a
something.
lot of different pieces together.
Right.
That's actually a big kind of part of my story that I'll get into later, of how like my life developed into learning about these things. But yeah, so basically the torture like program in and of itself, it ended in 2004 because the Supreme Court gave them habeas corpus, but it didn't really end at all, because they just did torture by new means. So like
Mm.
through forced feedings, and like that included sexual assault in a way, because they did force feedings orally and rectally. And there's a story of a guy who because they were force feeding him rectally. And this is just like one of many. And like, it obviously is just like, that is rape, you know? I mean, we know in Abu Ghraib that they literally raped people with their machine guns or whatever they're called. I don't know enough about guns to know what kind of gun it was, but like, it's absolutely vile. And these forced feedings, like these are violent. These are people screaming, crying, begging them to stop their bleeding, like the pain of like a tube, like a giant tube going down your nose. Like it's horrible. And then on top of that, you know, they're still at risk of having solitary confinement. They're getting beatings if they're not following in line. I'm sure that there was plenty of other things that were going on too. They were just now staying hidden because the torture program had to officially end, you know? And so there's so much that we won't ever know because it's obviously classified. But yeah, and then there's just like the psychological torment of knowing that you're going to be held indefinitely without a trial for how many years, for the rest of your life, possibly. And more people have died in Guantanamo Bay than were ever convicted.
Wow.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. That's insane.
Yeah. And now it's like in this limbo era, you know, and a great person to read on any type of thing that has to do with Guantanamo is Andy Worthington. He's awesome. He's done great work on this. And basically, he has talked about how, you know, they could try to charge, or they could try to take all of these cases to federal court, but they're not going to do that because then they would have to talk about the torture. And it gets into this, you know, space where that's where the limbo and the cycle comes in, just because the defense attorneys are like, well, we can't have a fair trial unless we can talk about the torture. And then obviously the government doesn't want to talk about the torture, so they're never going to put it into a federal court to be like truly tried. And then they try to, you know, come up with a charge to even charge them with. They don't even have anything to charge them with. Yeah. And so the most fundamental charge that they have tried to implement was that these people were, quote, providing material support for terrorism. And they tried to make that into a war crime, but it's literally just not. So it just creates this cycle where, you know, I'm pretty sure that there's 39 people still left at Guantanamo. And most of them have been like set to be able to be freed, and yet they're still not. You know, they've won their cases and they're still in there. It's been years.
Still in limbo.
So because they've created this situation, you know, they chose Guantanamo because they needed to find a place that they could hold all of these prisoners that they had without it being in the reach of U.S. courts. And it's like, there we go. Once again, that's all you need to know. Like, why would they want to not be in the reach of U.S. courts? And it's because they don't want to have any sort of due process. They want to hold without charge or trial. So everything that we think of when we think of, you know, law and order or whatever it is in our court system and just innate natural rights, they're all gone. They're all eroded. And they obviously did that because, you know, they wanted to institute torture. And I think they understood that, like, we can't try these people, and they just didn't think ahead of the consequences of what it would look like to round up hundreds. And then what are we going to do with them? You know?
Well, there was an absolute fervor after 9/11 and just a bloodlust and a bloodthirst
100%
for revenge for what happened. And so many people suffered needlessly because of that.
Yeah.
And
that's the moments you need your principles the most. That's the moments that the U.S. Constitution is meant to.
It's,
you know,
RFK just said this. It exists for hard times and for tough times.
Yeah.
That's
people
why it exists.
Really forget this though. People just want it. Some people just justify. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Well, that's very much the school that Meatball comes from. I mean, he's basically neocon, Project for New American Century reloaded. You know, because he's very much of that war on terror, neocon, Bush, Cheney matrix.
Yes. Yeah.
And that informs his worldview. And obviously you're a young dude and you're like, send me to Gitmo. I want to go to Gitmo. Yeah.
Yep.
Dude, you got to be some kind of special psychopath to seek that out.
Exactly. And he's been bad on his foreign policy. I mean, across the board in Congress, he does not have a good record. Critical of, you know, Pentagon spending, but then doesn't do anything to reduce military spending, or Pentagon waste, but then doesn't do anything to decrease military spending. He's, you know, worships Israel. If you want to
Didn't-
talk about that, go
Well-
listen to Reed's my podcast with Reed.
Yeah, didn't Meatball go over there before he was running to sign a bill, an anti-BDS bill,
Yep.
for the state of Florida? He made it a point to do that while he was in Israel, correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep, he
Yeah.
went on a world tour. I may or may not have a
You got a
very
package?
close source to Ron DeSantis.
Oh, really?
Things. But I
Really?
shouldn't say them, but we'll say them privately.
Really? Oh, well, maybe after we're rolling, you hang out with me. Let me know some things. Definitely,
Yeah.
I want to hear
I'm
some things.
gathering information.
Jesse Ventura, your intel gathering, Quinn, for the operation. And you know what the operation is, Quinn? It's peace. We're peace mongers. We're the peace lobby.
Exactly.
We want to stop the bombs and stop the torture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then he's horrific on Iran. Like, has done everything.
He's a real
he
saber.
can. Yeah.
Oh, he probably was doing backflips when the king executed Soleimani, when he drone struck him.
Yeah.
And I was just saying today, that was the most like scared and worried I was during Trump's whole 4 years when he drone bombed Soleimani and those other officials there at the airport. That was like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that.
That was a time in my life before I had known as much as I do now, when I was listening to Ben Shapiro.
Oh my God, you poor thing.
Horrible.
First of all, Quinn, facts don't care about your feelings, okay? I don't care about your feelings. I'm going to go fight 12-year-old high school kids and own them.
Yeah, literally.
That's
I'm always
all he
like,
does.
yeah, you're right. Facts don't care about your feelings. So why do conservatives have so many ridiculous feelings when I share with them the facts? You hate America. No, I
Because
don't
they're
hate
babies.
America. I'm just sharing facts.
Oh,
You're just getting emotional, and you
The
can't.
Daily, exactly. The Daily Wire, like Crowder, right wing
hurts. It
culture
hurts.
war, industrial media it's so painful to watch those guys.
It's
They're just they're just grifters. They don't have a moral compass.
Major grifters. It's insane to see. And like, I feel like, I don't know, when I was like listening, I don't think I realized how bad it was. And I think it just was a matter of taking a step back. But
Well, hey, look, that stuff is a pipeline for a lot of people, like into the political world, and I get that. Like, yeah,
yes,
they have a lot of like
first step.
Yeah, young and fresh faces, and they're culture warriors, and obviously they're right about some things, but it's just like they're one-trick ponies. That's it. That's all they talk about. They own just the culture wars, and that's what Meatball's whole thing is. His whole thing is culture wars.
And wokeness. It's all culture wars.
Florida, Quinn, the place where woke goes to die. I'm working on my Meatball impression.
I really personally make it a point to not make my page about culture whatsoever. I truly believe it's a distraction. I refuse to play into it. I refuse to do anything clickbaity. I could have, I'm sure, a lot more followers by now if I chose to do, short videos that were clickbaity. Like, I even know, like, I can't make a video that's less than 5 minutes. I don't know how to do it. It's impossible because I'm not willing to compromise certain information that I need to have on there. That, I don't care if only 100 people watch it instead of 1,000. Those 100 people are going to fully understand the issue, and it's going to be totally laid out for them. They're going to understand my opinion because I've laid it out very clearly, and it's not going to, like, you know what I mean? I just feel like my integrity is it needs to be on par. Like, I will not put out anything that's not been thoroughly researched again and again. And that's my perfectionism a little bit too. But
I love that. Well, Quinn, props to you. And that's what just blew me away and impressed me so much about your Meatball reel. I had to watch it a couple times, and I'm like, God, that's so good.
Thanks.
That's so on the money. And it's not a 10-second clip of a Bud Light, someone just holding a Bud Light.
Right.
And then there's the video. Oh, we own the libs,
God, I can't.
A video of Kid Rock putting a Bud Light up his ass,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, I understand that, listen, like, a lot of people don't know a lot of stuff. Like, that's just facts. We all grew up in government schools. I didn't know anything from government school, and I was valedictorian, and I don't even know what the hell I learned. Like, so I really am like, you can't just say, like, people actually need things like Guantanamo Bay broken down for them, especially if they love Ron DeSantis and they're like, well, we probably had to torture those people, so it's fine. And so you got to break it down, and I wish it wasn't the case, but I don't blame people for maybe not fully understanding sometimes things.
That's it, Quinn. You have to make things bite-sized, and you can't get mad at people for what they don't know. and jump down their throat and insult and demean their intelligence.
Exactly.
Because there was a point in time where we didn't know what we now know.
Exactly.
And somebody helped show us the way. I mean, I think about Base Lord Scott Horton. Scott Horton has woken so many people up to the follies of empire.
Yeah, he's amazing.
And he does it with righteous indignation and just fire and facts.
Yes, I know.
And so my brother and I try to use humor as our way to like stand out with people, and they're like, oh, these guys are funny. And then they'll hear a couple of things that we'll say, and they'll be like, man, I've never heard that before. Like, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I should maybe dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah. I know we keep getting off track. Sorry, this is like typical of me. We can go in 1,000 different directions.
Quinn, this is Freeform Jazz Odyssey with the Donald. Okay, you're listening to NPR at the top of the hour. We're going to have Quinn reading the weather. Okay, it's raining meatballs right now. It's a total disaster. It's a complete disaster. Yeah, so I guess you saying you were like 2 when 9/11 happened. So kind of bring me back and what got you onto this path, and just talk a little bit about your background and your upbringing and stuff.
Well, should I finish my stuff on DeSantis, because I haven't even gotten that far?
Actually, if you want to finish the meatball,
we haven't even gotten to what he's done. The evil.
That's a good point.
Okay. So let's be fast about that. So basically, I'm trying to pull up because I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. So yeah, he got to Guantanamo, and he was one of Patrick McCarthy, who was a captain there, his main aides. And so basically his entire job was to make sure that the guards and the military personnel adhere to the law, right? So he's a prosecutor. So in other words, he's there to make sure that they can, he can bend the law in accommodation to the rules that they're already breaking and the laws that they're already breaking, because everything that's happening there is already illegal. So, he talks about in an interview, he gives an example, and he's like, yeah, my job was to give legal advice. And he says, quote, so the commander wants to know, how do I combat this? And he says, so one of the jobs of a legal advisor would be like, hey, you can actually force feed. Here's what you can do. I'm like, why would he say this in an interview? This is not good for him. Wow. He's smarter.
Self-incriminating meatball.
Self-incriminating meatball, exactly. So yeah. And like I said, his job description would have included really intimate interactions with the detainees. He's the person they would have gone to say, hey, this is happening to me. Any accusations of torture or abuse, he's the person they would have gone to. He had contact with them on a daily basis. He looked them in the eyes, and that's just kind of what makes the entire thing so much more abhorrent, because it's like, you were so involved, and then your job was to go back and say what the military personnel could do without getting in trouble. Because let's be honest, that's what really went down, and other prosecutors left. They requested to leave their position because they couldn't morally stay in this position. It was against their legal oath and their moral character of them as a human being. And, that's not what happened with him. And many prosecutors left and then went and fought against what was happening in Guantanamo. But what DeSantis did was leave and then defend Guantanamo, support it. And that's what's crazy. And I let everyone know, my brother's in the U.S. Air Force. He went to the Air Force Academy, and he's full on in. And I understand that a soldier is there to follow orders. They have absolutely no say in what's going on. You basically give up your entire freedom as a soldier. It's really sickening to watch. And I'm and I say it in my Instagram bio, I am pro-troop, anti-war. That means something to me. Because people sign up to be brave and do the right thing and fight for freedom, or whatever it is that they have in their head. And so I let everyone know, obviously we know that DeSantis is a lieutenant. He's 27 years old. He has no say in what's going on in Guantanamo, but that's not the problem. Problem is that he was there, he saw what he saw, and he continued to, support this place and defend it. And so as a House member, when he went into Congress in 2012, he was the chairman of the House Oversight Committee on National Security. And so he presided over a congressional hearing on the remaining detainees at Guantanamo Bay. And he opposed closing the base. He opposed transferring the detainees to other countries. He opposed transferring the detainees to a federal prison that's like highly, protected, like a really secure federal prison. And he opposed giving detainees normal rights that would be afforded to any typical defendant. And, he just again and again and again touts this lie and repeats this lie that like they're all just terrorists. Well, at this time, Bush had already released, this is in 2012, so Bush had already released hundreds of people. Obama had released hundreds of people because of the fact that they're just suspects. That's all they are. You have absolutely zero evidence. They have no reason to even be there. And if we were talking about this situation within like a U.S. courts and law enforcement perspective, like all these cases would have been thrown out immediately. Well, we don't know about that but it would have been more upon that type of aspect.
They wouldn't have lingered for so long.
They would have lingered for so long, and it would have been a way bigger deal. But because it's foreigners, I guess. The other thing is we've had like an American citizen in Guantanamo too, and they didn't know it was an American citizen, and then they had to let him go.
Wow.
Like just craziness. So the fact that he just continues to repeat this lie and is like, he just says really gross things. Like he says, these guys should not be treated like they're committing civilian crimes. They should be treated like they're violating the laws of war. What are you talking about? Laws of war? What are you even talking about? You have no evidence to back up what you're saying. He wrote on Facebook in 2016 that based on his experience in Guantanamo, quote, "I know you do not want these terrorists released." And then when he was running for governor, he made like his military service a major theme in his campaign.
Front and center.
Yeah. And in one of the articles I read, someone that knew him said that part of the reason he went into the military is because he had political aspirations and he knew it would look good. So, yeah.
Hey.
And then in his ad, it shows him like in his Navy uniform, and the narrator's like, he dealt with terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, right? So he's bragging about it. He's proud of it. Mm-hmm. And then he just, he says in his subcommittee when he was, chairing that, he talked about how it's a very professionally run facility. It's a very stressful environment for our uniformed personnel who are there. And then the other thing that was pretty crazy, in 2014, when he was doing an interview with Fox News, they asked him about the fact that, it's a huge cost on taxpayers to keep Guantanamo open. And it's one of the most expensive prisons in the world, if not the most expensive prison in the entire world. And he blamed the cost partially on religious accommodations. So he said, they get 3 special halal meals a day. They get around-the-clock medical care. They get the Qurans when they want it. So they're treated far better than they would be treated almost anywhere else. And that's costly.
What do they need that round-the-clock medical care for?
That's exactly. I was like, round-the-clock medical care.
Yeah, for all the torture that Meatball's signing off on.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then he says crazy stuff like he characterizes claims of abuse from the detainees and from their defense lawyers as a he basically says like the detainees are using things like detainee abuse offensively against us. It's a tactic, technique, and procedure.
That's
what?
That's some Meatball psyoping right there.
Yes, and then he called like their hunger strikes, so they'll who do hunger strikes, in protest to their abuse. He calls it a jihad against the United States. I'm pretty sure you don't know what the word jihad means, but moving on. Like, how is a hunger strike a jihad against the United States?
I mean, that's like
what are you even talking about?
The only thing these guys had available to them to do anything about what was happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's strange. So yeah, he just thinks it's like an attempt to work the system, but it's like,
yeah,
what is even in your brain?
It's a cognitive dissonance, and it's explaining away and just trying to really like whitewash it and burnish his own credentials and just present himself as a decorated patriotic meatball.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last thing that like I'll finish up with here too is like, because before I was doing this, I was Republican. And so I'm always like all about small government and the Constitution and all these things that I thought Republicans believed in. And so I, just like Scott Horton says, like attack the right from the right, you know, I try to let people know, like, Guantanamo was an innovation, and it was established through just horrific policies that, you know, took congressional or took executive power to the next level during the Bush era. And like the theory that underpins the innovation that is Guantanamo is called unitary executive theory. And it basically means that when the president wants to, he's entitled to act unilaterally without interference from Congress or the judiciary. So essentially, it's a theory that has this concept. It was based off of a theory that has a concept of like a complete erosion of separation of powers and checks and balances and all these things that whatever his face, freaking Meatball, you know, claims to believe in, you know? So even from his own standpoint, it makes no sense, which obviously to me, like, this is obvious. Like, of course, he's inconsistent. That's no surprise. Every politician essentially is. And he also supports Section 720 of FISA and supports, you know, spying on American citizens and all the good stuff. So it's like, he doesn't believe in law and order, clearly. He doesn't believe in inalienable rights. He doesn't understand, apparently, you know, Declaration of or Bill of Rights, Constitution, anything like that. So the whole thing is just pretty nuts. But yeah.
It is. Yeah, you just made the case right there. And I really recommend, you know, people don't just take Quinn and myself's word for this. This guy, man, he's a nasty customer. And I just don't believe he has any business becoming president.
Yeah,
And, you know, I want to get his record out there because they are just going to wrap the whole meatball psyop in a flag.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going to present it to us that he's a patriot and he's a you know, good old conservative boy, and they don't want to be asked or talked about this, you know.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It's independent media and people like us. It's falling on us to do this and have these conversations and bring to light this information that I think is
and
very.
The establishment is fawning over him.
Oh
and,
well,
like, the Daily Wire drools over him. They support him so hard.
They're meatball simps, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you have the fraction of the king, MAGA, who are going to be loyal to their king no matter what. He's going to have that 30% no matter what. And with more candidates jumping in the GOP clown car, the king only needs that 30% to win the nomination. So, I mean, DeSantis he's puffed up by super PACs and a few billionaires that left Trump. But I will say, you're probably excited about this too. The debates are going to be amazing.
Yeah. It's
the entertainment that we're going to get once the sometimes I call Trump the Emir too. Once the Emir gets up there against the meatball, it's going to be everything. It's going to be it's going to be something that pay-per-view, quite frankly, and WrestleMania could have never dreamed of. Okay, ratings so high that they're almost as high as Hunter Biden, but not quite. Okay, not quite. But yeah, it's we'll be keeping an eye on that, and you know, obviously, if you discover more information, I'll be sharing your stuff and telling my audience about it because it's you know, it's very important information, and really kudos to you for digging that up.
Thank you.
And putting it out there. So yeah, I guess we could turn to some lighter things and some.
Away from the torture talk.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, you delve into this stuff and it really it sears your soul. You know, my brother and I have been digging really deep into this stuff basically since 9/11. So we're looking at like 22 years each. So I tell people, my brother and I, the Jackman brothers, are collectively 44-year brain trust of knowledge.
Yes.
About the war on terror, about 9/11, about the Iraq war, WMDs, all the lies, the media, the Bush administration, PNAC. I mean, these guys were like the boogeymen when I was in high school. Like Tom Ridge with his color chart of the Homeland Security terror alert level. I mean, that's like my boogeyman in high school.
I know, it's crazy. I feel like I have so much catching up to do. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job because I just read.
It's
but
seriously really, really impressive.
But yeah, it's rough because I feel like there's so much catching up to do. And I feel like I'm at a place where I'm like, I know what I need to know about like Ukraine, Russia, because it's happening in my time, you know, and I can really keep up with it. But going back and just trying to understand like the culture of the time and, you know, what the temperature was like and what was really happening. It's like, I'll never know truly because wasn't there, wasn't around.
It was scary. I mean, there were times where there was no TSA. They didn't have that to get on a plane.
I know, it's wild.
And for a generation of people, they don't know that reality.
Yeah.
They don't know a world pre 9/11 where that just permeation of fear and propaganda and hatred and othering of a group of people. That is.
And now they just act like nothing's happened.
Well, that's it. I mean,
It's just over.
Same with the flu world order. Think about how batshit people went during the flu world order with mandates and lockdowns and masks and shaming people who didn't want to get a certain boop boop.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden,
those people were the loudest. Now they're silent.
Yeah.
And it's like it didn't happen. And you could say the same thing about the 9/11 Iraq War generation. I mean, Donald Rumsfeld passes away, and we got to have like tributes for him and salutes and. These people who just were a blight on humanity and just
absolutely
were instrumental in making sure this torture happened and the lives of WMDs. So I'm really, it blows me away, and it gives me a lot of hope to see someone like you digging into it and presenting it now to a new generation. So you're carrying the torch,
Doing my best.
It's awesome. So you're to be applauded and commended for that. So we got some comments here. It looks like one of our favorite viewers. It's his birthday today. IB Denmark. Happy birthday, IB. JC says, can Lindsey Graham take time from his busy Russian prison schedule to give IB Denmark a birthday shout out? Well, that Auntie Miss Senator Lindsey Graham can certainly do that for you, IB. JC, what a great person you are, putting that down. And I was visiting some prisons over there. We were looking to do some remodeling over there. I was with Martha Stewart. Some of the blinds and the shades aren't that nice. And then I went on an aircraft carrier because those boys in the Mediterranean Sea, they need sunscreen because it's really hot over there. But yeah, happy birthday, IB, and thank you for always supporting this channel. And JC, that was very kind of you. Thank you very much. Let's see, what else do we got? Got another one. Why does nobody remember UC Berkeley law professor John Yoo, who made torture in Guantanamo legal for the Bush administration?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Not a name I came across.
Yeah, John, thanks for remembering or putting that name out there. That's a name I haven't thought of for years, and I'd have to go back and take the dust off my mind about John Yoo, but definitely something people should look at because he was part of it for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, I'll put that back up so you can see it. Johnny Yoo, torturer, you torturing dog, you. Let's see. Fire Pixie says, some of us remember and don't stop talking about it. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I put out a post on my Facebook, and I'll tell you what, I was pretty buttoned up and quiet during the whole Flu World Order thing. I obviously felt how I felt about it, and there was no way in hell they were going to jab me with that thing.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to fight with members of my own family. I didn't want to fight with people I've been friends with most of my life, my neighbors, colleagues. So I kept pretty quiet. But the video just came out by Matt Orfalia called Nobody is Safe, where it's a 12-minute clip of him just taking the media and all the talking heads and all the propagandists and the politicians and the actors and the Hollywood dummies ganging up and bullying people who were like, whoa, wait a minute, I want to do more research on this. And this thing has a 99% survival rating, and it's really the elderly who we need to be concerned about. So what I said about it, if you don't mind, I'll read it. It's just a couple paragraphs. Yeah. I said, this is probably the best summation of what it was like during the insults, snark, belittling, gaslighting, shaming, and overall irrational childlike behavior from so many people during the Flu World Order. I largely kept quiet to avoid fighting and confrontation, but this video captures exactly how I felt the whole time and how I continue to feel. The people who behave this way know who they are, and I would hope at least feel some kind of shame and regret, but maybe not. My hope is that we can examine this time period and recognize how powerful fear and propaganda are. We should also realize that these psychopaths are not our friends and do not give a damn about you or I. These are the same deranged outlets that lied about WMDs, the Iraq War, torture, and everything else. It was certainly with that in mind why I knew not to watch or listen to them during this madness, or any time for that matter. I hope it was eye-opening for a lot of people who for too long had their heads in the sand. For those of us who were steadfast in their conviction to not play into the madness and forsake others for a difference of opinion, I salute and I stand with you.
Nice. I love that. That was really, really well put.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah,
well put.
that was like 3 years of bottled up
Yeah.
angst.
Yeah. I
You
know.
know?
I feel like I didn't really talk too much about it either because it was one of those things where it's like, it's one of those subjects where I felt like I don't have the authority to speak on it because I don't know enough about it to speak offhand. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
I'm not willing to like say things if I don't really, really know it. You know what I mean? And so it
Yeah,
was one of those things where it's like I knew it because other people knew it so well, but I
right.
didn't. It's not enough to like be able to bring that to everyone else. And so I just kind of just didn't talk about it at
That's
all.
that's fair, but the other side, even though they didn't know it, they might even know
Well, that's
less
the funny thing is
than
like
you
they
and
didn't
I. They
know
were the
either, and then
loudest.
they'll say whatever they need to. Yeah,
They could shame you and bully
exactly.
you and name call
And they
you and
probably know.
belittle.
They definitely know way
They
less than I
they
even knew.
watch they unironically watch MSNBC and that angry little boy Rachel Maddow. Okay, Quinn, she's the angriest little boy I've ever seen. She's just horrible. Okay, and then you got Joe and Mika Brzezinski. She begged me to come to Mar-a-Lago when she was bleeding from her face from a botched surgery very badly. She was bleeding very badly. That's when we love Trump, when he does that kind of stuff. Um,
I know he is funny. I can't deny it. Don't
he,
like
he
him, but
yeah,
he makes me laugh.
you can recognize how funny he is, right? Like
Yeah.
when I interviewed RFK Jr., I said he's fun though, Bobby, right? And he said, yeah, he is fun. And then Bobby told me he sued Trump twice. Actually, he was involved in a couple of lawsuits against Trump, and while those were going, Trump still invited Bobby to fly with him on his jet down to Palm Beach during the holidays.
Wow.
And Bobby did it. In New York, everyone knows each other, and in the
Right.
high society. And
Yes.
what it was Bobby's wife was looking for a way to get the family down to Palm Beach for the holidays. And Bobby said, well, we can go and do that if someone can come up with a jet for us, and just we can fly down there. And someone pulled through. And you know who it was who pulled through with that jet, Quinn? It was me. Okay? It was me. I offered up the jet. And in our interview, Bobby tells a funny story how Pulp Fiction was playing on the plane, and his kids were pretty young, so he didn't want them watching it. But it's all crazy stuff. So John here says it's John U, spelled John and then YOO, not
Okay.
YU. Sorry, he says. Okay.
Do you still want to get into other stuff?
Yeah. So I'm curious in your background and what kind of put you down this path, and who like were your early influences. Who were the people that told you about some of this stuff, or just put you down
Yeah.
the path you're on?
Yeah, I grew up with parents that, just Republicans. So obviously they were into Bush at the time. And I remember like McCain and Mitt Romney. But I remember my parents didn't really like either candidate, at the time. So they were like kind of on the edge of like could go for the Trump in 2016 when it came around. Because I think they saw like the BS that was happening with McCain and Mitt Romney. And they really were like small government type Republicans. And so I kind of grew up always a little bit interested in politics and, really enjoyed learning about American history and the Constitution and these like principles, freedom, liberty, all that stuff. And so then, but I grew up like also in high school, like Ben Shapiro every single day. Like that was like my time in high school because I was in high school from 2013 to 2017. And so it was just all Ben. And I also really liked Glenn Beck. And I read like basically every single one of Glenn Beck's books. Sometimes I kind of like Glenn Beck as a person a little bit. I think he has some, crazy takes sometimes, but I don't know. There was sometimes a little ray of light for him, even though he was so horrible back in the day. But at least he's like repentant persons, okay? A little bit.
There's an allure. There's definitely an allure. I can't
There's
deny
some
it.
type of allure, and I know that like as a man, I think he's a good man. I really do kind of get that. Maybe.
I mean, he's
I don't really know him.
is he with the Blaze, right?
Yeah, he's with the Blaze. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like the big poobah with the Blaze. The Blaze too. They're very much in the culture war, but sometimes
For sure.
they'll have good based people on who are concerned about the things we're concerned about.
Right. Exactly. So that was kind of like my background all growing up. And then when I was 15, mind you, I was born in Vegas, lived in Utah. We lived in South America for a year as a family. And then we moved to Idaho because that's where my grandparents lived. And so I went to high school in Idaho. And so I had never, literally, not joking you, I'd never met someone from the Middle East ever. I'd never met a Muslim, like nothing. I lived in white America.
Yeah.
And when I was 15, I grew up very, religious. We grew up Mormon or LDS. And I was reading like some essays about Islam when I was like 15. And it was the first time I had actually really even learned about anything that had to do with Islam. At that point, the only other thing that I'd ever learned was like in a 7th grade class one day during like class just for one single day for like social studies. Other than that, I knew nothing about that religion. And I don't know why it shocked me so much, but it went from knowing nothing to being like, oh, this is actually a sister religion of Christianity. In my head, I was thinking it's like the most foreign thing possible from Christianity. I had literally no idea about anything. And I learned, it's an Abrahamic religion. We all go back to Abraham. Everything up until Abraham, we essentially believe the same things. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And then especially with Mormonism, there's like a lot of different parallels. And so that's what really interested me. Just like a few doctrine parallels, and then just culturally, like with families, not a lot of like drinking or anything like that, kind of a little bit more strict on certain things. And so I was just fascinated. And a little bit of me was just kind of like, why didn't I know any of this? Or like, why does it seem like none of the adults around me know any of this, like not even close? And that was really interesting to me. So I kind of went down this path of wanting to learn more about Islam. And just because I really think religion is absolutely fascinating. And I probably call myself more spiritual than religious, but I'm just like super open-minded about religion. I'm pretty spiritually fluid. Like I think that every religion is professing truth in some aspect. I don't think any of us have it more right than the other, to be honest. Right. Maybe I'll get in trouble for saying that. But that's just my view on things. And so I just found it really fascinating to see like how much we come together and how much we're the same rather than we're different. And then that led me to learn more about, a little bit more about foreign policy. And I really actually went into it with such a confirmation bias, thinking like, I want to learn about what made these Muslims like hate Americans, and that's like the approach I had going into learning about it. And so it's actually really interesting because although that was my approach and I was kind of searching for that type of bias, and I started off reading books that would maybe go along with that, I found myself all of a sudden, learning more and more about the Middle East, more about the religion, more about the culture, more about the language, and then more about the foreign policy and the wars. And all of a sudden it was like, I'm really glad that this was my approach because I didn't come from it of a place of like, I'm anti-war, so let me read all these anti-war books. It was like, I'm pro-war. I thought war was necessary, and I thought everything that we did there was right and good and for a reason. And I thought it had all to do with like Islam and like religious extremism and, nothing to do with what it actually has to do with. But because I was reading so much, I suddenly just started putting all the puzzle pieces together, and I was like, this doesn't make sense with this, and this doesn't make sense with this, and none of these things are lining up in the way that I thought they were going to line up. And so I just think that's amazing because it's kind of, for me, it was like when I sought after truth with like a genuine seeking of truth, that's really just what was brought to the table. And I just thought that was really special. And so I went to school at Brigham Young University, and I studied Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic. I was only there for a year, left. It just was not the school for me. And I wasn't fond of like just the way that we learn in a university. So I moved to Italy. And then when I was in Italy, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to move to Jordan. Because I really want to, because I had traveled a bit on my own at that point, like around the world. And so I felt comfortable doing it. And at this point, I knew enough about the Middle East that I knew like where to go, where it's going to be the most safe for like a single young woman and things like that. Anywhere in the world you go, you obviously have to be aware of those things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Detroit. I'm going to be aware of what the hell is going on and aware of my surroundings.
Yeah.
My parents weren't like crazy about it, but yeah, I found myself in Jordan in 2019, kind of moved there without a plan. I started taking Arabic classes, and then I ended up getting like an internship, doing some like religious freedom work. And then I met my fiance, and he is Palestinian and he's Muslim. And he's awesome. He's lived all over the world as well. He speaks Russian, he speaks fluent English, he speaks Arabic. He's like the best ever. He's amazing. And showing up in Jordan, I was able to just learn so much, obviously, from being there. And that's why I went there in the first place, was just to have like a real hands-on experience. And every country in the Middle East is very, very different from each other, like very, very different. So whenever people ask me, I'm like, okay, well, depends where you are, you know? Saudi Arabia is very different than Jordan. The capitals of every country is very different than the other cities in the country, you know? But one of the major revelations I had was I went and lived in Jordan as like full-on Zionist, like
Wow.
loved Israel. And the funny thing is that I was like that with very, very limited knowledge of what the issue was really even about. And I had been listening to Ben Shapiro for like 5 years. You know? What else am I gonna?
Of course, you're gonna.
Am I gonna think any differently?
That's what you had in your head about it.
And so I was the perfect example of someone who had such a strong opinion about something I knew literally nothing about. But I just had like my few talking points, you know, that I got from Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro. And it was a pretty good slap in the face for me that was needed. But the good thing is, like, I went there, like, I really want to know what's really going on, you know? And so I'm thankful that I wasn't like hard-headed enough to just like, you know, whatever, not listen to the knowledge that I was given. And then all of a sudden here I am, you know, about to get married to a Palestinian.
Yeah.
And he was the first person that kind of was like, wait a second, I'm going to send you a couple videos to watch. And then I got really, really, really interested in Israel, Palestine. Like that's one of the things I've probably the most read on, especially because now it's like personal.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So,
Palestinian fiance, and you're going to be, his family is now your family. And
exactly. And my kids one day.
Right.
And most Jordanians, or most people in Jordan, they're either, you ask, it's like a normal question, like, are you Palestinian Jordanian or are you Jordanian
Well,
Jordanian? Because
I
it's
think
all Palestinians.
after the Nakba, I mean, a lot of them went to Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. They like basically built Jordan. Yeah, they run all like the banks, all the businesses. The Jordanians like only have the government, and that's like their only little bit of power that they have there.
Is that King Hussein who runs Jordan?
I think it's King Abdullah.
Or Abdullah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and he was like a fighter pilot in his day.
Yes, I believe so, and he's British too.
Okay. Yeah, and that's another thing a lot of people don't realize. A lot of the leaders in the Middle Eastern countries have Western educations.
Oh, yeah.
And grew up, you know, very Westernized and liking the West.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I actually want to look. Yeah, it's King Abdullah of Jordan.
Abdullah, okay. Who's King Hussein? Where is he?
I think that was his dad.
Okay.
But there's, I don't know, there's tons of Husseins.
There's lots of Kings.
It was his dad. It was his dad.
Okay. Yeah, he was the dad. Just like Assad's father was he's Bashar al-Assad. His father was Faisal
al-Assad, I think that's right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, that's how you like really get to brass tacks about another culture and a part of the world and society. You go live with them. Go over there and meet them, you know, because
exactly,
like you said, this narrow understanding that we have, especially here in America, is a pro-Israel media. We're just given talking points and propaganda from the moment we're born. And you have to seek out the alternative sources of information and knowledge to that conflict on your own, or you have to be made aware of it.
Yeah, and there's so much fear mongering that goes along with it. I remember when I came home, I came home right before COVID happened just to visit, and then I ended up getting stuck in the U.S. And my mom, my parents, they came home having spent so much time there and like just in this whole different world. It's like it's very foreign. It's foreign and yet not. There's a lot of like Americanized things there and stuff, but she was just very concerned about me being with like an Arab man, and she had, all these stereotypical things in her head, which is like, yeah, we all have stereotypes for a reason, and there's certain things, but we're all individuals ultimately is what it comes down to, right? And then
Right.
there was just this aspect of all of a sudden I was like telling all these things about like Palestine and stuff like that, and you know at first it's like put the brakes on because you're telling me things that are like crushing my entire worldview, and it's like scaring me, and I know my mom's gonna listen to this and be like, why are you saying this about me? Because
We
she's
we love
wonderful,
you. We love
smart,
you, Mom. We love your daughter. You
and
did
she
a great
knows
job.
like I've had to crush my whole family's worldviews.
Well, you know what? You are living your own life, experiencing your own life and your own truth, and they got to respect that.
Well, and they've come around too, but we were
Yeah.
all in that same, we're pretty like tight knit, so it's like
Yeah.
just trust me on this one. And it's cool the way that they've learned as well and seen things different.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. You go to other parts of the world, or you have friends. You mentioned, meeting a Muslim or someone who's Arab, but I didn't really know anybody until when I was in college. We had a gal I was in college with here in New Hampshire from Iraq,
Yeah.
and I never knew anyone from Iraq. All I knew about Iraq was what I saw on the TV screen and
Yeah.
what I heard about some of my peers who had gone over there. They were gung ho to go over there initially, and then they came back and they were like, "Dude, that we have no business. I mean, this thing is a moral occupation and just
Mhm.
a affront to anything
And
right."
it's just a mess, even
Yeah,
strategically from their own like viewpoint. Like it
it
makes
is.
sense.
And it was interesting because her name was Diana, and I became very good friends with her, and she was very pro U.S. invading and overthrowing Saddam.
Hmm.
Whereas my posture at the time was I was against the war and I was against the occupation, and I tried to, we had many amazing and beautiful conversations about it, and I'll just forever be grateful to her friend for her friendship and learning about her country, and because where else I didn't get to have that kind of conversation,
Yeah,
and I
that's awesome.
wish I wish a lot of people, especially the people making decisions about war and peace, could go and hang out with the population of a country we're about to destroy or bomb and
Yeah.
murder people. Like one of the reasons that I love Tulsi Gabbard so much and really got into her and worked on her campaign in 2020 is she went to Syria. She was a sitting member of Congress, and she had so much guts and courage and was so based that she gave a middle finger to the entire foreign policy establishment, uniparty in DC, and went over there to see what was going on for herself.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Now, I wish that there was a member of Congress or someone in power who was going to be part of the decision to authorize war in the Middle East that would have gone over to Iraq and checked out what was going on for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, and we know that anyone who, especially during those Bush years, said that this is not a good idea, this doesn't make sense for X, Y, and Z, they're fired. I mean, like the biggest thing about DC is it's you go along to get along. So whatever the set narrative is, if you don't fit into that box, that's it for you. You know, you could be, that's what I always try to explain to people. It's like there is really smart people that know what they're talking about and they understand the ins and outs of the Middle East and how confusing that place is.
Yeah,
And, the feuds and the tribalism and all these different aspects. But when they have their set narrative, they're not going to be listening to you. You're not going to rise on that ladder. It's like a corporate ladder. It's like you have to kiss all the ass, say
yeah,
the right things, and
yeah.
if you do that, then you're in a good position. And if you don't, that's it.
Right,
And
you're
then
out
you
of
have
here.
all like the political aspects, political capital, all these like different layers to it. It's just nuts. But yeah, so that's kind of my experience. And then when did I find Scott? I found Dave Smith on Joe Rogan, I
Okay,
think 2020. And I remember just randomly listening to that episode. And I was like, who is this guy?
right.
He's saying everything that I've ever thought. And he's like saying things that make so much sense to me. And it was like I was just searching for like some type of like guidance on like what to do because my political world is like I'm like lost politically. I don't
Yeah.
know like where to go or what to do. And I remember in high school, I'd always say something like, oh, I lean more libertarian because my older brother would always say something like that, but I didn't actually really know what that meant.
Yeah, it sounded good.
It sounded good. And I used to say the exact thing that maybe you're not supposed to say, which is like, I'm like socially liberal, but like fiscally conservative.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had that spiel for a while. Yeah.
And then because of Dave, I found Scott. And
Right.
then Scott Horan just like changed my entire life. Like
Yeah.
literally changed my entire life. I read everything I could. I would listen to all of his interviews. Like I went down the archive on him. And yeah, I've read enough already, like 5 times.
Wow.
That book is like torn apart. I've given like everyone I know a copy of it.
Stocking stuffer for Christmas.
And then I've read every single book that was cited in enough already.
Wow.
So I'm going deep.
Doing your homework.
Yeah.
So your mom is watching.
Oh my gosh.
And
Embarrassing.
No. She said, I'm listening. I'm the very proud mama of Quinn. She's a genius. Tiffany, I tend to agree. She's a very stable genius like me. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes I send my mom these links. I think she knows how to work YouTube. She's, she's like 60, 66, 67. So sometimes she struggles with the tech, but she saw my interview with Bobby Kennedy and she liked it. So that made me feel good.
Oh my God. The fact that you even had him on was like,
I
was like, I'm going on a podcast that JFK was on.
Right.
Or not JFK, RFK was on.
I got JFK right behind me. Yeah, well, his nephew. And I have to say, when I was interviewing him, looking into his eyes, I saw his father, Bobby Kennedy, and I saw his uncle, JFK, and I felt a Celtic spirit, a warrior spirit of truth.
Cool. I've listened to a couple interviews with him, and I like his vibe for sure.
Yeah.
And if I had to vote for someone, it's obviously going to be him,
Awesome. Yeah, I'm hearing that from a lot of people from all across the spectrum who are tired of the uniparty, tired of the warmongers, tired of all the bullshit. And I make this point that Trump called out the deep state and said it for what it was, but he didn't really do much against it.
No, he didn't do anything, and he's just putting stuff out there and seeing how it lands.
Yeah, exactly. Just throwing lasagna at the wall, and we need the wall. We're going to build the wall. It's under budget and ahead of schedule. Believe me, Quinn, it is. And Bobby understands what the deep state is because they were part of what killed his uncle and his father. And this guy has sued all the government agencies. He sued major corporations. He helped clean up the Hudson River in New York. I mean, he's a serious dude. And
yeah, he really is. And he actually knows what he's talking about.
He knows what he's talking about.
He has opinions and arguments and knows details and all these things that you haven't seen from politicians.
It's so refreshing. And then you know what? When he's wrong about something, he likes being corrected and he'll own up to it.
Yeah, like a normal, smart person. Yeah.
So it's I'm real excited about it, and I know it's an uphill battle, but just him being in the race, saying the things he's saying with the platform he has is it's really inspiring.
It's awesome. It's super cool.
Yeah, it's been really good. All right, well, we're coming up on an hour 12. We'll go through a couple more comments here, and then we can wrap up. IB Denmark says RFK Jr. 2024. Absolutely. We need critical thinking. Add junior to the name, please. Well, I did. Let's see. JC says Tulsi, RFK Jr. and a few others will be at PorkFest next month. Yes, they will.
Oh, I was debating whether I was going to go, and now I'm 100,000% going to be there.
You need to talk to the fiance. You need to book tickets to New Hampshire tonight. Okay.
I'll be going alone, but.
Okay. Well, you got to book your ticket. Yeah, I went to the last 2 PorkFests, and I spoke last year with Reed. And Reed and I will be there. I'll be at PorkFest with RFK. I was going to ask you actually
if you were going to be there.
Yep, I'll be there for RFK Jr. And then I'll be there for when Tulsi's there. So we can rap about that afterwards.
Yeah.
All right. So
For anti-regime change, she just needs to work on her stance more. Oh, for sure, she needs to work on her stance with war on terror. She still, spouts the lie that we're fighting for our freedom and things like that, and the typical stuff. But it's better than nothing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, she was, reminded me a lot of Ron Paul, and her being the only one with a national profile in 2020 talking about the things she was.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And
I like that. And that's how I've always been with things. And I think that's how you win people over. You can't come at them with piss and vinegar.
yeah,
And,
I tend to get in my like space where I'm like, I need to be like super pure on like my ideology and things like that. Cause it does matter, but whatever at some
yeah.
point.
Well, awesome, Quinn. Well, I included the links to your information where people can
Okay, cool.
find your work and your Instagram, and you know how to check out what you're up to.
Okay.
So yeah, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and
Yeah, thank you so
definitely,
much.
absolutely, we'll have to have you on again and keep up the great work there.
Thanks. Thank you
Yeah,
again for having me.
absolutely, my pleasure. I enjoyed it. Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Jackman Radio. I'm your host, Eric Jackman, and the best way to support this channel is to go to patreon.com/Jackman Radio. We're up to 39 monthly patrons right now, and I love you guys. You help keep us going. We just want to keep growing. That will help us continue to put out interviews like the one we did with RFK Jr. That was an amazing, high-end, high-quality production, but it costs serious money, Quinn, to do those things. So if we can keep building the patrons and get up to 300, 400, contributing $5 or $10 a month, we can keep rocking and rolling and doing epic stuff and traveling and flying to conferences and interviewing people and flying guests to New Hampshire and all kinds of cool stuff. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to this channel and find us on Twitter at Jackman Radio. And I will check you on the next episode. Have a great one.